Hello and welcome to Inside Intelligence, brought to you by the Master of Science in Intelligence Analysis program from the Johns Hopkins University. Tonight's presentation is on nuclear politics on the Korean Peninsula. My name is Peter Huggins, and I am the event producer. Tonight's event will be recorded and uploaded to the AAP YouTube channel. With that, I will turn the program over to Dr. Michael Ard.
Thank you very much, Peter, and welcome everybody to Inside Intelligence this afternoon. A lot to talk about today. We have a discussion on nuclear politics in the Korean Peninsula. As you know, there's been quite a lot of political activity and military activity going on in the peninsula with missile tests from North Korea, joint exercises between the US and South Korea. And of course, we also have the G20 summit occurring right now, in which North Korean nuclearization has been a major topic. With us today to discuss this and make sense of it all for us is Dr. Youngho Kim, Professor of Political Science and Foreign Affairs at Sungshin University in Seoul. He served as the Human Rights Ambassador of the Republic of Korea from 2012 to 2013. He also served as Secretary to the President for Unification during the Lee Myoung-bak administration and during the 2011-2012. He was a visiting professor at Keio University, and he received his BA from Seoul National University and his PhD from the University of Virginia. Welcome, Dr. Kim. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Mike.
Now, today, Dr. Kim will present for us, and we will be able to ask questions. Please put your questions in the Q&A and the chat. Dr. Kim, over to you.
Okay. Mike, thank you very much for your kind introduction. It's my great honor to be invited to this webinar. I'm also greatly honored to have an opportunity to discuss the North Korean nuclear issue with the audience joining this program. I'd like to start my presentation by telling you recent North Korean missile provocations. North Korea fired the record number of missiles early this month. The total number reaches almost 40 missiles. 25 missiles were fired in a day on November 2nd. When you look at North Korea's recent missile provocations, it is unprecedented because North Korea didn't react militarily in the past while US ROK combined military exercises were underway. At this time, US aircraft carrier Ronald Reagan was participating in the US ROK naval exercises, and 240 aircraft were joined in the air exercises called Vigilant Storm. North Korea has become emboldened with its nuclear weapons deployment. We can see this boldness and adventurism with the timing of North Korea's massive firing of missiles during the period of US ROK combined military drills. As the North Korean nuclear crisis deteriorated, the United States began to take steps to strengthen extended deterrence to South Korea. With growing North Korea's nuclear and missile threat, the credibility of US extended deterrence is being questioned in South Korea. South Koreans raise a doubt about whether the United States will implement promised extended deterrence if North Korea threatens to strike the ICBM against US-made cities. We see that political reassurance of South Korea is as important as the military deterrence of North Korea. We need to take into consideration both the military side of deterrence against North Korea and the political reassurance of South Koreans when we discuss nuclear politics on the Korean Peninsula. What I am trying to do in my presentation is to explain the official policies of the United States and South Korean government. My presentation will focus on what kind of dilemmas the United States government is facing in devising responses to North Korean nuclear threat. I also provide you with alternative policies proposed by security specialists for today's discussion purposes. For starters, I'd like to mention North Korea's nuclear capabilities and strategy. North Korea is de facto a nuclear state, even though it isn't recognized as such by the international community. North Korea is the only country which broke away from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which is called NPT, in 2003. After that, North Korea conducted the first nuclear test in 2003, and the sixth test was done in 2017. Now, preparation for the seventh nuclear test is complete and imminent. We don't know whether North Korea will conduct one test or multiple tests simultaneously. If the test is conducted, the purpose is to complete the capability to miniaturize nuclear warhead. North Korea has both plutonium and highly enriched uranium nuclear programs. With these nuclear programs, North Korea is estimated to possess 60 nuclear warheads. This number is based upon assessment of the amount of fissile materials North Korea has extracted from Yongbyon nuclear facilities and the clandestine underground thousands of centrifuges. When you think about the current level of North Korea's nuclear development, it's not easy to find the diplomatic solutions to the problem. Past nuclear negotiations with North Korea failed to come up with expected result. We consider this failure with the result of 1994 Geneva Framework Agreement, the six-party talks, and high-profile U.S.-North Korean summit of 2018 and 2019. On September 9th this year, North Korea enacted what is called the Nuclear Policy Law. This policy law is similar to the U.S. Nuclear Posture Review. North Korean young leader Kim Jong-un said at the ceremony that North Korea isn't interested in diplomatic negotiations if these negotiations aim to abolish North Korea's nuclear weapons. This nuclear policy law emphasizes the importance of a preemptive strike in North Korea's nuclear strategy. You can see North Korea's intention to kill nuclear weapons with the enactment of this law. North Korea might come back to a negotiation table only when its nuclear power status was recognized and arms control talks begin. However, the United States can't accept North Korea's nuclear power status because it will bring about a nuclear domino effect in the East Asian region. Deterrence is the prudent policy left to the United States and South Korea to deal with increasing North Korea's nuclear threat. North Korea's increasing nuclear threat reminds us of the importance of the concept of a security dilemma. North Korea's decision and effort to increase the regime security through a nuclear program invite strong reactions from the United States and South Korea. In the face of international sanctions and the strengthened deterrence of the United States to South Korea, North Korea became more vulnerable than before. North Korea has fallen into the security dilemma. North Korea's effort to increase its own security move in an opposite direction. North Korea's possession of nuclear weapons lead to a decrease in its security with escalating arms race on the Korean Peninsula and increasing new deployment of US strategic assets. North Korea claims that it has developed its nuclear weapons to cope with the antagonistic policies of the United States and South Korea. The problem with North Korea's claim is that it ignores the threat North Korea poses to the United States and South Korea. The security dilemma among three countries will intensify arms race on the Korean Peninsula. In the next, I will explain US policies on the North Korean nuclear issue. The United States made a diplomatic effort to solve the North Korean nuclear crisis since it began in early 1990s. We can see North Korea's patterns of deception in this diplomatic negotiation process. North Korea signed agreement and got economic benefit. Afterward, North Korea violated agreement and secretly developed nuclear weapons. The Biden administration proposed a dialogue with North Korea just after it came into office. North Korean nuclear diplomacy is stalemated because North Korea refuses to talk. The Biden administration don't want to offer an incentive simply to bring back North Korea to the negotiation table. Under these circumstances, the US policy is to provide extended deterrence to South Korea to deal with escalating North Korea's nuclear and missile threat. The US Nuclear Posture Review of 2022 clearly says that, I quote, any nuclear attack by North Korea against the United States or its allies and the partners is unacceptable and will result in the end of that regime. There is no scenario in which Kim regime could employ nuclear weapons and survive, unquote. This policy was reconfirmed in the recent US ROK Defense Ministers Security Consultative Meeting on November 3rd in Washington, D.C. This warning against the possible use of North Korea's nuclear weapon is explicit and unambiguous. I think that this stern warning helps to reinforce extended deterrence. The US can't recognize North Korea as a legitimate nuclear state because it will cause a domino effect for South Korea and Japan to go nuclear. North Korea can't be also rewarded for its withdrawal from the NPT. US policy focuses on enhancing deterrence against North Korea because complete denuclearization of North Korea isn't an achievable goal in the near future. South Korean public sentiment is uneasy with North Korea's increasing nuclear capabilities. Advocacy for independent nuclear development is increasing in South Korea. 70% of South Koreans support that idea in opinion polls. The ruling party joined the calls for redeployment of US tactical nuclear weapons, which were removed from the peninsula in 1991. Here we can identify the dilemmas of the US government faces in dealing with North Korean nuclear issue. First, diplomatic solution isn't possible in the near future. Second, the United States can't permit South Korea to develop its own nuclear weapons because of its concern with the collapse of the NPT regime and the nuclear domino effect. Third, the US is also faced with pressure from South Koreans with regard to the credibility of extended deterrence. In the face of these dilemmas, the United States and South Korea agreed to allow South Korea to play a bigger role in strengthening the viability of extended deterrence at the Security Consultative Meeting on November 3rd. According to this agreement, the US will increase information sharing, consultation on North Korea's nuclear capabilities and threat with South Korea. The US will also permit South Korea to get involved in strategic nuclear planning and executions of US extended deterrence. This mechanism can be construed as the first step to develop a US-South Korean version of nuclear sharing. The new mechanism is designed to enhance the viability of US extended deterrence without actual deployment of US tactical nuclear weapons. The US-South Korean version of nuclear sharing isn't satisfactory for those who assert redeployment of tactical nuclear weapons to South Korea. Despite these limitations, these new policies of the United States intend to deter North Korea and reassure South Koreans the credibility of extended deterrence. I will continue on to explain South Korea's policy on North Korea. The Yoon government of South Korea is working together with the United States to strengthen extended deterrence against North Korean threat. President Yoon said in an interview with the CNN that South Korea won't ask the United States to redeploy tactical nuclear weapons. President Yoon also said the Yoon government will remain as a member of the NPT and abide by the norms of non-proliferation. So when we think about these policies, the remaining option for South Korean government is to strengthen US extended deterrence. So the Yoon government demands that US strategic assets be deployed permanently in South Korea to enhance the viability of extended deterrence. The two countries agreed that they devise a coordinating mechanism to deploy US strategic assets on the Korean Peninsula at a level equivalent to permanent deployment at the Security Consultative Meeting. And so far, the United States deployed strategic assets on a rotational basis during the period of heightened tensions on the peninsula with North Korea's nuclear and ICBM test. The US deployment of strategic assets in a timely and coordinated manner is to reassure South Korea and enhance extended deterrence. So far, I've explained the policies of the US and South Korean government. In addition to these policies, other policy options are presented by security specialists in both countries. The first policy option I'd like to mention is that the United States needs to support South Korea's independent nuclear weapons program. According to Article 10 of Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, South Korea has the right to withdraw from the treaty in face of extraordinary event which jeopardize its supreme interest, that is, its survival. Despite advocacy for this option inside South Korea and abroad, the Yoon Suk-yeol government doesn't consider it a viable policy option because it violates South Korea's long-standing policy of non-proliferation. The US also can't support this option because it will destabilize the region with a nuclear domino effect. As I analyzed the dilemmas the United States face in dealing with the North Korean nuclear issue and other policy options in detail, we can see why the United States and South Korean government think deterrence is prudent policy to cope with North Korean threat at this time. The problem with this policy is what will happen if North Korea acquires 200 nuclear warheads in the future with its ICBM capability to strike US mainland. The report of South Korean Joint Chiefs of Staff says that North Korea's capabilities will reach such a level in 2027. North Korea can reach such a level of nuclear capabilities if diplomatic efforts to stop North Korea's nuclear programs are stalemated. Deterrence against North Korea has been working for the past 70 years. However, there is no guarantee that this deterrence policy will be effective under fast-changing strategic environment. The United States and South Korea need to find a creative strategic solution to cope with an escalating nuclear crisis on the Korean Peninsula. This concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kim. And let me quickly introduce Dr. Han to all our viewers who just was able to join us. Thank you, Dr. Han, for being here. Dr. Yong-Sup Han is a professor emeritus of Korean National University. He's also a member of the APLN, the Asian Pacific Leadership Network for Nuclear Nonproliferation and Disarmament. He launched the Korean Nuclear Policy Society and served as its first president. He also directed the Research Institute for National Security Affairs at Korean National University. He received his BA and MA in political science from Seoul National University, a master's from the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard, and a PhD in security policy from Rand School, Graduate School. Thank you, Dr. Han, for being with us. I know, so I'd like to give you an opportunity to comment on Dr. Kim's excellent presentation.
Do I have 10 minutes or 5 minutes? Or?
You have as much time as you like.
I mostly agree with Dr. Kim, and we discussed this matter before I came to Washington, D.C. for an hour, and I also gave my book, recent book, International Politics of Nuclear Nonproliferation and South Korea's Nuclear Policy. Given the North Korea's increasing nuclear threat, we have 4 options. But as Dr. Kim mentioned, the viable option is to strengthen the U.S. extended deterrence to make North Korea refrain from using nuclear weapons. Another option could be reintroduction of United States tactical nuclear weapons onto the Korean Peninsula, but this provokes North Korea. And yesterday we discussed this option, and most of the American scholars here in Washington mentioned that if United States introduces tactical nuclear weapons onto the Korean Peninsula, that could be North Korea's target, and it endangers kind of risk of nuclear preemptive strike. So in addition to that, U.S. government doesn't want to introduce nuclear weapons onto the Korean Peninsula. And the third option could be South Korea's going nuclear independently. And this option, we have a very tragic experience during the Park Chung-hee administration. I analyzed that with the released documents, diplomatic documents between 1974 and 1976. And U.S. government increased the pressure on South Korean government to give up the nuclear weapon program. And finally, in January 1976, Park Chung-hee government promised to give up all the plans, secret plans. First of all, importing Canadian power plant, and also the importing French reprocessing facilities. Altogether, we gave up, and there was missile program to develop a delivery system of nuclear weapons. That was done by Korean ADD, Advanced Defense Development, but it stopped also in 1978 after the test of White Bear backbone plan. The range was 180 kilometers and short of 300 kilometers under the MTCR guidelines. So from that time on, we couldn't develop missiles, even though it was conventional missiles. And it was during the Kim Dae-jung administration, our government negotiated with the United States and to extend the range of missiles to meet with the MTCR guidelines, only 300 kilometers. Even though North Korea tested the Daepodong missiles in 1998. In terms of missile capabilities, we are very shorter than North Korean missiles. So during the Lee Myoung-bak administration, it extended to 700 kilometers, and now United States got rid of all the limits on South Korean range of missiles. And so we cannot develop or cannot think of developing nuclear weapons on our own, even though people say that we have plenty of reason to withdraw from the NPT, but without having technological potential to have a nuclear weapon, develop nuclear weapons, either uranium enrichment or reprocessing, we don't have any kind of capability to prepare nuclear materials. What is the use of withdrawing from NPT? Just we are following North Korean case to become a rogue state, second to North Korea. It is abnormal and ridiculous. So Even though our public support rate for going nuclear is high, government cannot follow that. Government should keep people from having that kind of public support to translate into the policy. We cannot do that. So also under the NPT and also mutual defense treaty between United States and Korea, U.S. has responsibility to provide positive security assurance and also negative security assurance against North Korea. So United States has responsibility to provide positive security assurance, including nuclear umbrella. That's why United States government, especially Defense Department, pledged to provide extended deterrence, including nuclear umbrella. And since the North Korean nuclear test, first nuclear test, it is augmenting all the nuclear extended deterrence every time. And then it culminated in the actual materialization of extended deterrence and how to strengthen extended deterrence to enhance credibility and the reliability of U.S. provided extended deterrence. And the last option could be, even though United States provides extended deterrence, that is kind of basically retaliatory deterrence, deterrence by retaliation or by punishment. Once North Korea uses nuclear weapons, United States can, employ all the nuclear weapons to retaliate North Korea. But in the preemptive strike to prevent North Korean use of nuclear weapons, I think South Korea has to develop conventional capabilities to do such kind of to be ready for the preemptive strike to prevent North Korea from using nuclear weapons. On that point, United States cannot do that. Preemptive strike to prevent North Korea from using nuclear weapons. That is, very, very tricky, and United States cannot do that. So South Korea should have, equip us of having that kind of conventional capabilities and reconnaissance and then capabilities and detection capabilities, and also the conventional strike capabilities to be able to do preemptive strike. That is on our side. So between Washington and Seoul, we need to consultate how to divide our roles and how to prepare each side. That is the first option. And having said that, I think Yoon Suk-yeol government is on right track. Compared with the previous government, Moon administration, which neglected to strengthen the deterrence and extended deterrence, and also our preemptive strike capabilities. They neglected for 5 years. So this is what Yoon Suk-yeol government is doing rightly, and that is current policy I am supporting. And I'm also, as a former president of Korean Nuclear Policy Society, I am telling the Korean public very cool and cool head, not something like agitating people to go nuclear, very irresponsible. So in contrast with Russia now, in the Ukrainian war, they are threatening to use nuclear weapons. That is, I think, a very dangerous. North Korean leadership is carefully looking at that. And if once Russia uses nuclear weapons, then North Korea will follow. So it's very, very risky and dangerous situation. So the rest of the world should give a warning to Russia and also the Kim Jong-un. That's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Han. And I just have, we have some questions in the chat. I'd like to get to them. But one thing that we should probably mention is, what do you see, gentlemen, the interesting summit we had at down in Bali? This issue came up. Of course, there was a meeting between President Xi and President Jung to discuss this. And also President Biden, I believe, spoke with President Xi. So there's a lot going on the issue. There's a lot of, it's being raised at a high level at the G20 right now. What do we see coming out of this? And how do you see Beijing viewing this problem right now?
I think Xi and Yoon's summit in Bali was meaningful because this is the first summit, and in comparing with the former summit between President Moon and Moon and Xi in Beijing, South Korean government gave too much concession to President Xi in terms of three things. No what is a THAAD deployment, or South Korea no entry into US-led MD system, and also no to South Korea, Japan, United States alliance. In return for nothing, just goodwill gestures and pledge. That was too much concession on our side. So Yoon government wanted to correct our diplomacy toward China. And you have to see what President Yoon mentioned to President Xi. This is a very different approach. Up until now, South Korean government, asked Chinese positive and constructive role in denuclearizing North Korea. Please help us to denuclearize North Korea. But this is not begging. It was begging China's help, but because of our Professor Kim and me gave a strong message to President Yoon, and China as a responsible NPT nuclear weapon state, and also P5 members, you have a responsible for other countries or is non-proliferation. As a P5 member and also NPT nuclear weapon state, you are responsible for setting up your non-proliferation policy, and you have to ask your ally not to develop nuclear weapons. You are responsible. So you need to exercise your own discharge, fulfill your responsibility as a nuclear weapon state. So you have to do that kind of role to meet with the NPT nuclear weapon state and P5 members.
Mike,
This
during
is-
the
This is a different approach. So I think highly of that kind of statement. China should pay attention to, and China, but on the other hand, China, President Xi mentioned that South Korea needs to improve relations with North Korea, and also something like that. And also, if North Korea accepts President Yoon's audacious deal, then China will help something. That is very kind of saying one thing and responding another. So it's a little bit different. And anyway, China will think twice of what President Yoon mentioned. So that is meaningful anyway.
Thank you. Youngho, you had a comment?
Yes, you're right. South Korean President Yoon Sung-yeol asked Xi for China to play a constructive role in preventing North Korea from conducting a seventh nuclear test and giving up nuclear weapons. And also President Biden told the same thing to President Xi. However, we cannot expect tangible result coming out of these serious summit meetings. According to Chinese diplomat Wang Yi, he said that the United States needs to take into consideration North Korea's security concerns. So China asked the United States to make concessions before it demand something from China. So the United States is going to increase the deployment of strategic assets on the Korean Peninsula in the region because China is not cooperating. So as long as U.S.-Chinese relationship is competitive, we cannot expect China to come forward to help North Korea to give up its nuclear weapons.
Thank you. Gentlemen, I have, we're going to go to the chat for our Q&A with our listeners. So let me get to that. One thing, of course, that strikes one always about North Korea's nuclear program is what the enormous cost must be to that regime to maintain it, right? So Mike asked, do you have a good estimate on how much North Korea's nuclear program might cost per year and how they manage to fund this given all their other economic challenges?
Recently, I think Bruce Bennett at Rand Corporation mentioned the cost for shooting missiles as far as 1 year is concerned. I think for the past 1 year, they spent almost kind of how much they say kind of $1 billion, right? $1 billion, but it took for North Korea to develop the nuclear weapons. It took $1 billion, but having developed already, I think shooting or adding more missiles, it doesn't cost very much, given North Korea's, purchase kind of they have a lower labor cost and they developed indigenously, so the cost is not very high, I think.
Mhm.
But anyway, they are. I think for Kim Jong-un feels some fatigue about nuclear build-up, and after they became de facto nuclear weapon state and adding more missiles, the diplomatic gain or benefit or economic benefit from negotiating with the United States or South Korea didn't pay off at all. So they are running out of economic resources, I think. So it gives a burden for Kim Jong-un. Once they become, they became prestigious and proud of having nuclear weapons and exercising threat, exerting threat to South Korea and United States, but no returns at all. So they are feeling very fatigued about that. We have to use that North Korea's disadvantage to the benefit of our security and peace building.
Thanks. I have another question too. What the Bruce asked about presuming North Korea isn't totally suicidal, what is their end game here? Do they even have an end game? What are they trying to achieve with this extravagant nuclear weapons program and missile program?
Yeah, Mike, I think North Korea has three objectives for developing nuclear weapons. The first, it is for regime security. The second one, North Korea want to use nuclear weapons as reunifying South Korea on its own terms. So it is what North Korean calls revolutionary weapon. The third, North Korea developed nuclear weapons for strategic purposes. They want to develop its own ICBM nuclear capabilities to strike against US mainland so that United States cannot implement extended deterrence promised to South Korea. So these three are the main purposes of North Korean nuclear program. However, as I told you in my presentation, North Korea fall into a security dilemma in the process. So Kim Jong-un think that if he develop nuclear weapons and have more nuclear weapons, he think that he and his regime will be secure. However, this kind of North Korean actions or provocations invite reactions from the US and South Korea. So Kim Jong-un regime become more vulnerable than before. So even though Kim Jong-un want to have absolute security for its own nuclear weapons program, it is not an achievable goal. So when we think about the cost of North Korea's nuclear development, according to the US State Department report about the amount of world countries' defense budget, North Korea is the number one. In 2019, the ratio of North Korean defense budget to GDP is the maximum 26%. In 2017, it was 23%. South Korea only spent 2.6 or 2.7% of GDP. So if North Korea continue go down this track, the country's solvency will be a problem. So I mean, North Korea cannot sustain itself in the long run in terms of finance and economic assets, I think.
Thank you. Let's get to the issue of sanctions, because all this raises the question of whether the US will now increase sanctions on North Korea. And what do you think has been the impact of sanctions on North Korea and their ability to shape their behavior?
Regarding sanctions, I think it did play very well, and it impacted North Korea a lot. But after Hanoi impasse stalemate, and then North Korea secretly approached Xi Jinping and Putin, and they I suspect they are having some economic aid. And after Russia's invasion into Ukraine, I think Kim Jong-un made that chance to sell the missiles and artilleries on top of sending workers secretly, and they are having some earnings from money earnings from that field. So the economic sanctions doesn't work as effectively as before. So strengthening the North Korea and China and Russia ties, it's kind of becoming Cold War, a new Cold War era, and they don't feel any affected by economic sanctions. That is my analysis. But anyway, altogether, sanctions regime affected a lot. But within that constraint, the sanctions constraint, North Korea tries to find some loopholes, and the world atmosphere, new Cold War era, works to avoid that kind of sanctions constraint.
It was certainly, and this gets back to another question we had in the chat, which was what leverage the United States might have with China to get China to help cooperate again. And I think the point was made, very difficult in an environment right now, but we had that cooperation, didn't we, back in 2018, where they were cooperating with sanctions, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's
so
right.
How do we get back to that point where we can get their cooperation again?
Yes, it is very good question. China's role is very important to make sanctions against North Korea effective. So now the situation is like this. United Nations, United States, and world community closed North Korea's front door by imposing sanctions against North Korea. But North Korea make the back door wide open to North Korea. Even recently, even though North Korea tested ICBMs, China is against putting extra sanctions against North Korea during the UN Security Council meetings. So in 2017, Chinese-North Korean relations was not so good. In 2013, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un purged Jang Sung-taek, his relative. Jang Sung-taek was very close to China. So after the purging of Jang Sung-taek, China was shocked. So North Korean Chinese relations deteriorated, and China became cooperative with the United States. So in 2017, a series of important sanctions can be imposed. However, as I told you, now US-Chinese relations is very competitive. We call it hegemonic competition. So I don't see any possibility of cooperation from the Chinese side.
Thanks. Gentlemen, if you have a few more minutes, I know Dr. Han might have had to step off, but we do have a few more questions. I'd like to make sure that everybody has a chance if you can spend a couple more minutes with us to answer these final questions. Well, one question from Scott is, I mean, we were talking about this, the nuclear capacity and their missile capacity, but what about North Korea's own conventional military capacity? How is that expanding? And would they be confident in launching an attack on the South?
It is easily we are easily forgetting North Korea's conventional capability, but they say MLRS and also self-propelled artillery. Still, they are numbers are growing, and recently they test fired not only missiles but also the MLRS. The range is growing, and in the past the range of MLRS was below 150 kilometers, but nowadays it is over 200 kilometers. Also, they can load the tactical nuclear missiles on the artilleries, MLRS. So that is formidable. So if they want to start war, they will start with the conventional weapons first. So everybody is focusing on nuclear and missiles, but the South Korean military should be prepared for the artillery attack first.
Elizabeth asks, do we see or perceive anything in the internal politics of North Korea that might be driving the recent missile launches and this type of aggressive posture? Is it consolidation of Kim Jong-un's position, for example, or anything else that we might point to internally?
Professor Kim.
Yes,
We're going to talk, kick that one
I
to
mean,
Youngho Kim.
North Korean economy is not so good. So the recent North Korean missile provocations is related to change. I mean, bring a change in the atmosphere. So Kim Jong-un, what Kim Jong-un is trying to do is emphasize the outside threat. So he is trying to justify the development of nuclear weapons. So recently, North Korea fired over 40 missiles. The cost of firing these missiles is tantamount to the cost of buying rice for 2 years for North Korean population. So Kim Jong-un tried to persuade North Korean people for their difficulties by making these provocations. And also, there is a coalition between Kim Jong-un and North Korean military and the party leaders. So these military and the party leaders rely on Kim Jong-un's power for their survival. So this kind of North Korean version of a military industrial complex is working here. So as long as the current North Korean Kim Jong-un regime continues, you can see the continued development of nuclear weapons and continued provocation by North Korea.
And to answer, I think, the question, to sum up what we've said previously, they see that they have the backing from Beijing to do this, so they're emboldened in many respects. I want to finish tonight with one question that has come up a couple of times, and that is, and this relates back to what Dr. Han had mentioned. How is this relating to sort of the Ukraine conflict and what looks like sort of a realigning of sort of almost the alignment of the bipolar situation in the Cold War? I mean, do we see this as related somehow to the Ukraine conflict?
Yeah, as mentioned by Kim Jong-un is early supported Russia and also China in that matter. So Kim Jong-un wants to take advantage of the situation by selling the weapons to Russia and to send the workforce to Ukraine combat area. So as was revealed by the U.S. government, twice mentioned that North Korea is providing weaponry to Russia in Ukraine. So when the war broke, I thought, Kim Jong-un probably follow Park Chung-hee's case. When the Vietnam War happened, Park Chung-hee sent our soldiers to Vietnam and also sent workers to build the roads and something like that, right? So earn the money to develop our own economy. So Kim Jong-un will follow that and doing that. So that's from Kim Jong-un's point of view. He is very clever and smart to use this, Russia's war in Ukraine.
To help consolidate these relationships, right?
Yeah, consolidate. Yes.
Yeah, that's very good. Those are our questions. Any final thoughts from our panelists? We didn't solve the problem today we didn't solve the problem of nuclearization on the peninsula, but we understand it a lot better. And we really appreciate your being with us today. Dr. Han may have left, but thank you, Dr. Kim, for getting up so early to be with us. Of course, the time difference was dramatic. We appreciate that. As we look more carefully and we view these developments in Korea, we hope you'll be our guest again to help explain it to us.
Thank you, Mike, for inviting me to this webinar.
Thank you, and thanks, Dr. Han, for both of your insightful comments today. And for our listeners that are still with us, please join us next month, where we'll be presenting with Dr. Barry Zuloff, a presentation on moral courage and intelligence. Until then, this is Michael Ard, and we'll see you soon.